So thank you so much for taking the time to join today to talk about the School Principal Leadership and Mentoring Act. My name is Anna Shepherd Jones, and my primary work is tied to this law and helping to support the implementation of this new law. So I do appreciate you taking the time to talk about it today. You're going to hear me refer to it as the Principal Act for short going forward. And I also want to point out that there is a Google Doc that will have several different resources that I'm going to be talking about today. You should see it in the chat. I'm going to drop that link in the chat one more time for you, but it'll also include a link to this presentation for you to go back and review. All right, so today's session, I really want to talk about the purposes of this new law, the timeline for fully implementing the law. So we do have a long runway when it comes to full implementation of the Principal Act. So it won't be fully implemented for another 5 years. However, the program does start this year, and that stipend starts this year. It's just that the program requirements are going to increase over time in order to keep getting that stipend. So I want to be clear about that information. I also want to talk about the new program. You'll see that acronym APLDS. That stands for the Alabama Principal Leadership Development System. So this is a new program that's tied to the law and a program that we're wanting all of our principals and APs across the state of Alabama to participate in. So I'll talk through what are those steps for completion. And then lastly, hey, what are those requirements for that annual stipend? For administrators so that they can receive that stipend once they've successfully completed the program. All right, so let's talk about the purposes of the law. So the law lays out these three primary purposes, and the first is to create and implement this new leadership development system, this new program that I was telling you about that we want all principals and APs to participate in. Now, a second purpose of the law is to make sure that this new program that we're developing for principals and APs, that it includes a comprehensive statewide professional learning program for both principals and APs, but also a mentoring program specifically designed for new principals. And so I'm very excited about this mentoring program. Only about half the states offer a mentoring program for new principals and only a handful for 2 consecutive years. So I'm very proud that starting this school year, Alabama is among the handful of offering this mentoring program, this support for our new principals. And then that third purpose of the law is that annual stipend once they have successfully completed all program requirements. And we do like to mention to throw out that caveat that those stipends are always going to be pending legislative appropriations, but that's the same thing with any type of budget line item. Now, let's first talk big picture. Okay, so the ultimate goal of this program, so this APLDS program, is really to increase the effectiveness of our school administrators. So we're really wanting to build up a strong core of principals and APs across the state so that we're ultimately seeing improved academic outcomes for each and every one of our kids. So that's the ultimate goal there. Now, in terms of our measures of success, how do we know if this program is working and it's doing what we want it to be doing? Well, the law is very specific with what we're going to be looking at in terms of what data we're going to collect and see if the program's working. So this is what the law lays out our program measures of success are. So first, we'll be looking at principal retention rates. So we know that job is incredibly hard, and we're seeing people's tenure in the job getting shorter and shorter. And that's not unique to us in Alabama or even the field of school leadership. You know, that's something that we're seeing at the field of education at large. So again, we want to build up that strong core and keep them in the school administrator position. The second thing we'll be looking at is school climate. So for this one, think in terms of perception data. So we'll be sending out a survey every spring statewide where we'll be asking our stakeholders and measuring that school climate. And then the third measure of success are student outcomes. So for this one, think in terms of those report card indicators, achievement and growth, right? So these are the measures we're looking at every year, and the data that we're required to report to the legislature every year, letting them know, hey, these are the results that we're getting through the implementation of this program. All right, so this program, that APLDS program, this new leadership development system, it has 6 major components. So it's really a pretty comprehensive system of support. So I'm going to hit them at a very high level right now and then go into more detail as I go on during the session. So the first component are updated standards. So principals and APs now have a new set of leadership standards that were recently state board approved back in May. Now, the second component is a resource. So it's a framework to accompany those new leadership standards to help understand what those standards are, what they mean, and strategies to help support implementation of those new standards. Now, the third program component is a new evaluation system for principals and APs. So this APLDS evaluation system will actually replace Lead Alabama for principals and APs starting this school year. So I do want to spend some time on that one because I know that one is very new for us. So Lead Alabama will in fact be available to district administrators if that's something you still choose. It's completely optional, but this APLDS evaluation system is not going to be optional for our principals and APs, and I think you'll understand why once I get into it a little bit more, because we're going to use this evaluation system to track their progress towards program completion. So that's why we need everybody to complete this evaluation system. So I'll talk all about that. The fourth component is high quality professional learning from a state approved list. So I know you're familiar with TEAMS, the TEAMS Act, and you probably have some TEAMS teachers, and very similar in that they have to participate in professional learning from the state approved list to be eligible for that stipend. So same idea here. So the law says that principals and assistant principals will need to complete at least 5 days of professional learning from that state approved list. Now, we know that 1 day of professional learning is about 6 hours, at least 6 hours. So we just encourage you all to think in terms of clock hours. That's going to be the easiest thing for us to do. And so principals and APs will need to complete at least 30 clock hours from the state approved list. And I'm going to show you where you can find that state approved list. Now, that fifth component is that new principal mentoring program that I mentioned. So this is not intended for principals who maybe were a principal in another district or now are they're a principal in your district. And it's also not intended for somebody who maybe was a principal in Georgia, retired, and then came over to Alabama to be a principal. So this mentoring program is intended for those who have never been in the principalship before. And it's designed for newly employed first-time principals. So the law specifies that newly employed means that their contract started on or after July 1st, 2024. And then that last component is a year-long leadership academy for principals. So you heard me say earlier that some program components, they apply to both principals and APs. Well, those are those first 4 components. So those apply to both principals and APs. Those new leadership standards, that framework that's going to accompany the new standards, this new APLDS evaluation system that's replacing Lead Alabama starting this year, and then at least 30 clock hours from the state approved list. So that's for both principals and APs. Now, those last 2 program components, that new principal mentoring program and that year-long leadership academy, that only applies to principals and not to your assistant principals. And I just want to lift up, when you see that program logo to the left, that's usually what's tied to this APLDS program or tied to the Principal Act. And what you'll see are those 6 major components in that inside circle that makes up that logo. All right, so now let's talk about the timeline here. All right, so you'll see that this is a handout you have access to on that resource page with that link that was dropped in the very beginning. So you'll see in the those blue boxes, that tells you, hey, this is the behind the scenes work of our process for creating the program. And then those red boxes, that represents, hey, what principals and APs need to do for successful completion of the program in order to get that stipend. So you'll see by that first blue box that at the beginning of last year, so the 23-24 school year, we first had to establish the design team. Now they're the group of individuals. We've got about 25 leaders from across the state with varying experiences coming together to develop this program for our principals and APs. But we had to establish that team at the beginning of last year. And last year, that team focused on developing those new leadership standards, working on that framework, that resource that's going to accompany those standards, and working with class. We've actually partnered with class for the new principal mentoring program. So we've been working on those pieces with the design team. Now, us on our end of things, we've been working in AIM to revamp the professional learning plan. So your principals and APs are still going to go to AIM, click on that TE tile to access this new APLDS evaluation system. So we've been working on that portal so that we can meet the requirements of the law. But I'm going to show you all about that. I'm going to show you what's included in the professional learning plan, and I'm going to show you some screenshots of what you can expect to see once you actually get into the evaluation system. Now, this year, the design team will work on developing that leadership academy for principals and the other components of the evaluation system outside of the professional learning plan. Now, if we take a look at that first red box, so starting with this school year, so starting with the 24-25 school year, these are the program requirements in order to get that Principal Act stipend. So all principals and APs will need to complete that PLP in this new evaluation system and at least 30 clock hours of professional learning from that state approved list. And if I am a newly employed first-time principal, we need to do the PLP, at least 30 clock hours of professional learning from the approved list, and then new principal mentoring program in order to be eligible for that stipend. Now, it's not going to be until the 2027-28 school year that we're going to roll out the entire evaluation system. And so what I mean by that, we're actually rolling it out in 2 phases, right? So they're going to see certain components of the evaluation system, such as the professional learning plan and the evidence, but that self-assessment that they're used to doing through Lead Alabama will not be in place until 2027-28. And there's a reason behind that. That's because we have these new set of standards. We need a couple years to train people on those new standards, really understand what they are before we include them as a self-assessment in the evaluation system. So they're not going to see that self-assessment in the evaluation system this year. It's not going to be until 2027-28 when we fully roll out that system. And then in 5 years, by 2029-30 school year, that's when we're going to implement that Leadership Academy for principals. All right, so now let's talk about that first component, which are the new standards. So these new standards are called the Alabama Standards for School Leadership. And of course, what we do in the field of education with everything that we do, it needs to be driven by recent research and best practices. And so that's what the team did when they were crafting these new standards. They also considered language that's in the law. And there's language in the law that talks about the 5 domains of principal effectiveness. And those are visionary leadership, instructional leadership, managerial and operational, relational, and innovative. So the law names these 5 domains of principal effectiveness specifically. And so what the design team did here is they said, you know what, if that language is in the law, and we already know that the most effective principles attend to these 5 domains is rooted in best practices and recent research, let's just make those our 5 new standards. And so that's what they did. So I say that, and if you see that language of Alabama Standards for School Leadership, and then you see that language of 5 domains of principal effectiveness, so we're talking about the same thing here. And you'll also notice that those 5 domains are included in the program logo on that outside rim. And that's because every program component is being designed to help deepen their practice in these 5 areas. So when we talk about, hey, what is the vision for high quality school leadership in the state of Alabama? It's these standards right here. All right, so where can you find these new standards? So if you want to take a look at a digital version of the standards, you can click on this link. But let's say that you also want a PDF version because you want to talk through these standards with your principals and APs. You want them to underline, annotate, just have that hard copy. You have that available for you as well. But I'm going to show you the digital version now. So we have a resource page that I want to share with y'all that is called if you just go to alabamaprincipals.org, you're going to see lots of different information that's tied to the Principal Act and this APLDS program. Now, where I am specifically is on the tab that's called Standards, and this is where you can find those new standards. So remember, we have 5 standards, so you'll see those in bold right here. And then up under those standards, you'll see the different indicators. So those are labeled A, B, and C, and so forth. And so just to give you a little bit of context, we're moving from those 8 standards for the previous set of standards for principals and APs to now these 5 standards. And how many indicators we had before, I think it was close to like 100. So almost like, I think it was 99 indicators, but we're moving from 99 indicators to now just 30 indicators. And I point that out because that was a very strategic decision. It wasn't to say that all those other things aren't important, but hey, what does recent research and best practices say are the most critical things that principals and APs need to know and do in order to improve and drive that student achievement and other positive school outcomes? And so I think it's a really good set of standards, and I think you'll feel the same once you've had the opportunity to read through those. All right, so that's the first component, and that's where you can find those standards. So now let's talk about that second component, which is a framework to accompany those standards. I love how the design team described what they want it to be, what they want this resource to be. They said that they want it to be a playbook to equip, develop, and empower school leaders throughout their career pathway. So it's really being designed for anybody along that career pathway. So from aspiring to retiring, it doesn't matter. I can pick this up and I can use it to help deepen my practice as a school leader. Now, the way it's being designed is that for each of those indicators, remember now we just have 30, and those were the A, B, and C. So for each of those, it really unwraps that standard, what we need to know and be able to do. So what are those key concepts and critical skills? It'll also have a continuum of practice for each of those indicators. So what does it look like if I'm just emerging and developing in my skill set versus I'm transformational? Now, as a reminder, we're not going to have that self-assessment in the evaluation system until 2027-28, but it'll look very similar to what they're going to see first in that continuum that's part of the framework. And then it's going to have some strategies for them. So if I know that this is an area that I need to grow in, what are some strategies that I can put in place to deepen my practice and my knowledge? There's also going to be some strategies for you all as superintendents and district administrators to say, hey, how can I help support them develop in this area? And then there'll be artifacts. What am I looking at? What is some evidence to see if I'm on track and making progress? So we are engaged in this work with our partners, Region 7 Comprehensive Center. We are working on it now. We should have it finalized by the end of September, and then we should be rolling that out in October. So just be on the lookout for more information for that one. Now, this new evaluation system that's replacing Lead Alabama for principals and APs, I do want to spend some time on this one. So as a reminder, we're going to roll this out in 2 phases. So starting this year, we've got that professional learning plan and evidence, and it won't be in for another couple years that we're going to see other components like that self-assessment. So let's talk about the professional learning plan for principals and APs. So this is language directly from the law. So the law says that they'll need to have at least one goal for growth or achievement, or they can have a goal for both. And everybody needs at least one goal for school climate. Now, as a reminder, those were some of our measures of success for the overall program, and now they're looking at it at their individual school level. And then part of that plan will be, hey, what professional learning from that state approved list do I plan to participate in that's ultimately going to help me meet my goals? Now, here's the PLP cycle time frame. It's going to be the same time frame from year to year. So we're always going to roll over the new PLP and the new program, because remember, this is an ongoing program of completion for year to year. That's always going to be July 1st through that third week of June. And that end date is easy for us to remember because that's when we go into AIM and certify other data. So the PLP cycle, and in fact, the whole program cycle will always run July 1st through the third week of June. And then as we're engaging in that PLP cycle, it's very similar to what you're already used to doing, right? So if I'm going to set a goal, of course, I need to think about, hey, where am I now? The only difference being I'm very targeted and strategic with considering where am I now in relation to those three areas, because the law is very specific that we're focusing on growth, achievement, and school climate. Then I go to set the goals. So where do I want to be? Then I'm reflecting on, well, how am I going to get there? Well, that's the professional learning that I'm going to participate in. A critical piece to drive that continuous improvement process is how am I going to monitor my progress along the way? So, are we on track towards meeting our goals and then applying my new learning? And then at the end, of course, we're reflecting and we're thinking, we're evaluating the effectiveness. With this plan, what worked, what didn't, did we meet our goals, did we move the needle? So this truly is just the continuous improvement cycle that you're already used to doing with that PLP. And it's something that you're already used to doing when they do their ASIP every year. And so I point out the ASIP because I think it's a great opportunity to think through how we can streamline, how we can encourage our school administrators to streamline their PLP focus with our ASIP focus, because it's really just continuous improvement. So how can we have those different things that they're already required to do nested together so that we're just engaging in this work more strategically and more focused? So just some considerations when going to think about where am I now in relation to growth and achievement goals. You're probably doing the same thing that you've already done. You're looking at and determining, hey, what assessment data are available? We probably want to use our state assessment data using those results, but also what are some maybe other measures like benchmark assessments or common assessments so that we can monitor our progress along the way. You're probably already talking to them about, hey, what do we need to focus on with these goals? And so, what are we considering in terms of what are maybe areas that are not meeting our expectations? Are we seeing certain patterns that exist within the data with multiple measures, or maybe even across grade levels or within content areas? How are different groups of students performing compared to others? So engaging in that dialogue and answering those type of questions will help them really hone in their focus on what that PLP goal should look like. And then I'm sure you're also thinking of what do other data reveal about that student performance? So are we looking at some of those things like attendance and discipline that can be those underlying root causes that are contributing to the results that we're getting? So are we exploring what's happening there? And of course, we're using that data to set that goal and guide what professional learning that I'm going to participate in. Now, when we go to set that goal, we want it to be a SMART goal. I'm not telling you anything you haven't already seen before. But when we're helping to support our principals and APs to set those goals, of course, we want it to be specific. We want it to be measurable based off of the needs that we're seeing. We want it to be attainable. So how can we make sure that we're finding that sweet spot of what's a stretch but still within reach? We want it to be relevant and data-based and then time-bound. So with it being a PLP, of course, we're thinking about, hey, what can we accomplish within 1 year? So when we've been doing the longer sessions, going across the state for the longer 2-hour sessions talking about the Principal Act, we go over a couple of examples. Now, I'm not going to go over in great detail with these, but just so that you have a working knowledge of some of the things that we've been sharing. Here's one example. So if we're going to look at a growth goal, what if we're looking at our growth category data? So categories 1, 2, 3, and 4, and we break that down by our subgroups. And in this example, in this pretend scenario, what if we notice that our EL students, only 50% were demonstrating adequate growth? And we've defined that as being at a category 3 or 4 on that ACAP summative. So we see that there's a need. So maybe that should be our focus for our PLP goal. So again, this is just one example. What if we say in 1 year, at least 65% of EL students will demonstrate adequate growth on that ACAP summative end of year assessment, but also benchmark assessments. So just some of those key takeaways is that how are we making sure we're including those benchmark assessments so that we can monitor our progress along the way? So that's some guidance that we've offered. And then, hey, Anna, where have you gotten that 65% from? Well, in this pretend scenario, what if those were my pre-pandemic level percentages? And I'm trying to get back to that. And as a leader, I'm reflecting on what were we doing at the school at that time to see those type of results. Well, maybe we are really focused on formative assessments and using that to drive instruction and grow every kid the very next day, right? So the kind of big takeaway with setting those goals is that it's based off of the need. You want to monitor that progress, and there may not be one standard approach to setting the goal, just what makes sense to them in given the context of their school. And so it's just a matter of you doing what you've always done, having that dialogue with them, kind of coaching them up and supporting them to come up with what you feel like would be an appropriate goal. All right, so that is just some suggestions, but of course this is within the wheelhouse of the district, and y'all will be leading them through that process just like you already have. And you'll also lead them through the process of selecting that most appropriate professional learning. So just like we want them to be strategic and targeted when it comes to setting those PLP goals, it should still be the same when I'm selecting the professional learning from that state approved list. Right, rather than just saying, "Hey, I just need to get my 30 clock hours," and then checking the box so that I can get that check, that's one approach. But I don't think we're going to see the results that we want to see unless we're really leaning into this process as an opportunity to deepen our practice. And so, the way to do that is also be very strategic with the professional learning that they select. So some considerations when you're talking through that with them is, hey, what PD do you need to help you meet those goals? What PD do you need to help deepen your practice based off of the new leadership standards? So maybe we're reviewing those and seeing, hey, you really need to firm up your practice here. Maybe thinking about, hey, what's the most critical thing for you to focus on at your school right now, given the context in which you're leading? So maybe you've had a principal or move from elementary to secondary. So maybe they need to work on different things, like maybe their instructional leadership, skills and capacity. Maybe there's things going on, the student population is changing or the community needs are changing. So helping them think about, hey, what's the most important thing to focus on right now? And of course, we want it to be connected to your district's strategic plan and top priorities, because we don't want them operating in silos from that. So we want to really streamline these processes for them. And then thinking through what evidence will demonstrate the application of their new learning. So rather than just pulling that transcript from Power School Professional Learning, which is helpful, but what other types of more meaningful evidence will show that I'm taking what I'm learning and I'm applying it on my campus so that I'm going to see those improvements. And so just another quick example, if we are sticking with that EL growth goal, what if I need support? So I'm looking over those new leadership standards and I see a lot about data analysis. Well, what if I need some support in knowing which portals to go to pull that data, to be able to look at the data in patterns and trends and decide, hey, these are the most important things to focus on. And then to translate all of that into evidence-based strategies for my ASIP. And so that may be an area of support that one of your principals needs. And so there's going to be offerings from the Office of School Improvement for ASIP sessions. And so maybe they can deepen their practice by attending that. Again, if they're focused on having an EL growth goal. Maybe they want to participate in EL training provided by the State Department, which is high quality instruction and assessment training, which is something that's new and coming down the pike since about summer. So, and here's just some other examples of expected evidence that takes it a little bit more to that next level than just those transcripts or sign-in sheets. But what if they have they submit a completed data meeting protocol where they take those middle of the year results from one of your benchmark assessments. They break it down by subgroup and they're saying, all right, are we on track towards meeting this target for our EL students? And if we're not, what are our discussion notes in terms of our action steps? What are we going to do differently? What adjustments are we going to make for the remainder of the year? Remember, we also talked about streamlining that ASIP focus with a PLP focus. And so if I'm going to have a goal targeting my EL students, probably going to have some evidence-based strategies in my ASIP that also target my EL students. So maybe I'm uploading my ASIP. So they're seeing how these things can work in tandem and kind of streamline it, right? And then at the end of the year, when they're reflecting on those evidence-based strategies, what worked, what didn't, they're going into that Cognia platform and they're reflecting on that process and engaging in the step called analysis of findings. Okay, well, what if they copy and paste that as part of their evidence? So all that to say, just really encourage them to think through how they can tie all these different pieces together. And then when it comes to school climate, that's a vast topic, but we want them to approach it in a very similar way. So for this one, thinking in terms of that perception data, so thinking about those stakeholder surveys that they send out, they're still drilling down. Maybe they're looking at particular survey items. If they're seeing trends across their stakeholders and those results. And we're using that to hone in our focus for our PLP goals and using that to set our goal and guide our professional learning. And then we want that to be a SMART goal as well. Now, a lot of us across Alabama use those Cognia climate and culture surveys. I've got a couple for you just to take a peek if you want to look. But if you already have a good tool in place and a good process in place, by all means, you use that because that's going to be an LEA decision. Now, I do have one tool for you. Just it is completely optional. If you go to the school climate self-assessment, it'll prompt you to make a copy. You'll take a look at it. It's going to be pretty close to that statewide survey we'll send out, but it's just again another tool as an opportunity to reflect on where we at now in terms of school climate so that we can create that meaningful goal. And then just getting into another, with the longer sessions, we get into a school climate goal example. We're looking at particular items on a survey. We're noticing a pattern. And so maybe if I'm seeing results like this, maybe I just want to seek to understand why. So maybe I'm asking some of my trusted teachers, hey, what's going on? Why are we seeing that nobody wants to be on the campus? They're not sharing that they have very positive feelings. And so maybe again, in this pretend scenario, some of the teachers are talking to me about, well, it's just not a safe and orderly learning environment. It's chaotic. We don't have the discipline ladder really firmly in place. So I can't really get to the business of teaching and they can't get to the business of learning because of this barrier. And so in this example, maybe it's appropriate to have two PLP goals, one focused overall school climate increase, and then another focus on safe and orderly learning environment. So again, I'm hitting this at a very high level. You can go back and see some of the slides that are hidden that gets into more details, but just so that you know kind of the conversations that we've been having during those sessions and how we also want to be strategic with that professional learning and also do some progress monitoring just like you do for your academic achievement and growth goals. So that's something for you to take a look at. And then we have another tool, a PLP planning template. Again, it's completely optional, but if that's something that you want to use and help guide them through that thinking of being thinking through what should be in their PLP for this school year, that's available for you too. Now, I want to talk more about getting into the portal. So you're still going to go to AIM and you're still going to click on that TE tile. But what they see is very different from what you see. So I want to show you some screenshots and kind of talk you through what they're going to be seeing on their end, hopefully to prevent you having to sit side by side with somebody and they pull up their screen. You're like, okay, let me see what it is, so that you understand what this process is, so that you know how to support them. All right, so the school administrator, so that principal and AP, like I said, they're going to go to AIM, click on TE, and then they're going to see that program logo, and they're going to see that APLDS evaluation system, and they're going to click on that. Now, once they set up their user settings, like they've always done in the past, they're going to see these 4 steps. Now, these 4 steps, some of them are similar, but some are completely different, given how we're going to use this evaluation system. But there are 4 steps that they'll complete, and I'm going to go into each of those with you now. So the first step, super easy. It's just they are selecting what is their school administrator position. So am I an assistant principal? And if I'm a principal, I'm in one of 2 categories. I'm either a newly employed first-time principal, so I've never been in the principalship before, and my contract began on or after July 1st, or if I don't meet that criteria, I'm considered an existing principal. So they're going to select which of these best describe them. Now, why are they doing that? Because they have different program requirements depending on what their position is. And so it's going to filter in the evaluation system to tailor to what they should be doing. Now, step 2 is the PLP. And once they get into the PLP, they're going to see these 2 boxes. The one to the right, participate in discussion. That's similar to what you've seen in LEAD before. And this is completely optional. The intention of this one is if you want to engage in that dialogue between the supervisor and the school administrator about what are the most appropriate PLP goals, what's the most appropriate professional learning I'm going to participate in. Here's an opportunity. You can use this feature to engage in that process, but that is completely optional for y'all. Now, what is not optional is setting the goals. So once they go to set up the goals, this is what they're going to see. So remember, we said that they need a growth goal or an achievement goal or both. So those drop down boxes is going to change based off of what they select. So if they say that they're going to do a growth goal, they're going to see that drop down box for growth goal. If they select achievement, same thing. And if they select both, they're actually going to see both. And then everybody's going to see that school climate goal, because everybody needs to select at least one school climate goal. Now, a couple of things I want to point out with this example. Of course, y'all are going to be the one, like you always have, of leading them through that PLP process, selecting those most appropriate goals. But just a couple best practice tips. When it comes to this platform, all really they need to do is drop in that SMART goal, right? And so they don't need to have this long paragraph, this dissertation, because they've engaged in that conversation with you and kind of dug into the data to say, hey, what are the most appropriate goals? So they've engaged in that work. But when it comes to the platform, all they need to add here is just that SMART goal. And a couple other things that may just be easier for you. You may ask them, hey, you've got 2 school climate goals, put goal 1, goal 2. Again, this is just totally optional for y'all. And then something else you'll notice that in this example, there's only 3 goals overall. So remember, we're focused on growth, achievement, school climate. Only 3 goals. So just a best practice tip, helping them see that no more than 3 to 5 goals, because if they get beyond that, it's going to be really hard for them to maintain that focus. And so we're really wanting to encourage them to do less with greater focus. We'll also see as part of that second step, that PLP, they'll add their professional learning that they plan on participating in, and they'll see a link to the list. I'll show you how to find that as well. And then they're going to move into step 3, and that's once the PLP, they've completed it and it's been signed off by you or whomever's their supervisor. So once it's been signed off, they'll go ahead and be able to start adding their evidence. And so it'll look like this for them. So they'll have an opportunity to add text and upload documents. Now, I do want to point out that they will see a box that says other evidence. And so for this one, just think in terms of if your LEA has an additional evaluation tool that you're wanting to use, here's an opportunity for them to upload that here. But again, that is completely optional. And we do just have an example feedback form aligned to those new standards. If you want to take a look, it'll just prompt you to make a copy. Now, your principals and APs will also see survey items. So this is something that we're asking them to complete at the end of the school year. And the purpose of this is because we need information so that we can do our progress monitoring. We need that feedback about the program so we can see what we need to do differently and for our program evaluation purposes. So they'll complete these survey items. It's going to be shared at the state level in aggregate form. So that's not something that you'll be able to see on your end. Now here's step 4. This is completely new. It's not anything we've ever done before in our evaluation system. And this is because we need this process in place to know who's eligible for that stipend. All right, so once I've done my PLP goals, I've submitted my evidence, I've participated in at least 30 clock hours from that state approved list. So I'm wrapping all that up. I go to step 4. And this is where, if I'm a principal or an AP, I'm going to go in and say, all right, I hereby certify that I have successfully completed all program requirements. I've done all those steps. I've completed the program for this school year, or I haven't done it. So I haven't met all those program requirements. This is their way to communicate to you as the supervisor, either I've completed it or I haven't, and to communicate to us that they've completed it or they haven't. But here's where the checks and balances come in. So once they have indicated whether they've successfully completed or not, then the supervisor will come in, and that may be you as the superintendent or a district administrator. So whomever's supervising them will come in and say, all right, I've reviewed, hey, you've done your PLP goals because I saw those, they were done. I signed off on them by October 1st. So that's good. You've added your evidence. You completed at least 30 clock hours from the state approved list. If you are a newly employed first-time principal, you've done that mentoring program, year 1 of that program. All right, I hereby certify that this person has successfully met our program requirements. So that's you telling the state, hey, yes, this person is in fact good to receive that stipend. So we won't know otherwise. So that's why this new evaluation system is required, because that's going to be our process for you informing us that the program has been completed for the school year for that individual. Now, this is what it'll look like for you. So it looks different. So you're going to go to AIM, and you're going to still click on TE, but you're going to find that APLDS, that icon as well. So you're going to click on that. And then if you want to see just your principals and APs, you can select the continuum, do the drop-down box, and select school administrator. But this is what it's going to look like for you. So for your principals and APs, you're going to be able to see their completion of each of those 4 steps. So remember those 4 steps that they are doing on their end. So the first thing, as a reminder, that step 1 was their school administrator position. So you see that in this example, it's been completed, and it's also hyperlinked. So just another best practice tip, I would go ahead and click on that and make sure that they selected the right admin position. So you'll be able to see what every person has selected for that first step. Again, as a reminder, we're not going to have that self-assessment for another couple of years. So that's why it's just going to say not applicable for all principals and APs on that school administrator continuum. Then we move into that third step, that PLP. When you see that it's in completion status, that means that both the school administrator and supervisor has signed off. If it's not, you're going to see that in progress. So similar to what you see for evidence. But again, that's hyperlinked, so you can see what goals have been set. And then they'll move on to step 3, the evidence. So in this example, somebody is still in progress of doing that. Or if it says completed, that means everything has been submitted. And then that 4th step, that certification of completion, you'll see that status as well. So again, you're going to see these type of descriptions. If it says not started for each of those steps, then that person it's not been unlocked for them, and they haven't engaged in that step of the evaluation system just yet. So this is where you're going to go to monitor their progress of program completion. Now, a couple of dates I want to talk about. That new APLDS evaluation system did roll over in July. The PLP goals, so step 2, that needs to be completed no later than October 1st. So that's the state deadline that needs to be finished by October 1st. Now, you may have a different internal deadline for your district that's sooner, and if so, that's okay. Just tell them that, but just the state deadline is October 1st. Now they have to complete the other steps of the program and engage in the evaluation system, those other step 3, evidence, and step 4, certification of completion. Now for this, you're going to see 2 different deadlines, okay? And so you're going to have 2 different camps of people right now. And those are the ones who are retiring at the end of this school year, and those who don't plan to retire. And the reason for that is that the way this stipend works is that it's a one lump sum stipend once they've successfully completed the program. Now remember, we don't know if they've completed the program yet until everybody's certified and let us know, right? And so once we find out that everybody in the district has certified, either they completed it or they didn't, that APLDS district contact person will reach out to us and say, all right, we're all certified. We've all completed that step 4. Then our finance department will process those stipends. And it's going to take 6 to 8 weeks to process those payments. They'll go to the district, they'll go to that CSFO, and then you at the district level will disperse those stipends. Now I'm going to go back to why you have 2 different completion deadlines. Right. So we've gotten guidance from the finance department that those stipends do count towards retirement. So, that highest average 3 years within the last 10 years. So in order for that to count, though, they need to go ahead and get that stipend before their retirement date. So for them, those steps of step 3 and step 4 need to be done no later than May 1st. And that APLDS district contact person will reach out to us and say, all right, not everybody's certified, but this person, they've completed everything. Can you go ahead and start processing their payment? And then our finance team can do that on their end so that they're getting paid that stipend sooner, just to be in line with their retirement. Now, you see that second deadline for everybody else. So those who are not retiring is, remember, that 3rd week of June. So yes, they technically have until the 3rd week of June, but we really encourage people to go ahead and knock this out in May. And that's just because if we go ahead and have them complete everything, you let us know, we can go ahead and process those payments sooner, and then they can get paid sooner. So it's really going to be advantageous if we go ahead and knock all this out in May. So that's just our recommendation that we have. Now, I went through a lot of information, showed you a lot of clicks. And so if you need a resource to go back and reflect on, or maybe a resource to share out with your principals and APs, hey, these are the 4 steps, this is what you need to do. I encourage you to take a look back at that resource page that I mentioned earlier, alabamaprincipals.org, and there's a tab that says Evaluation System. And I just have a direct link here. So this is a really good resource for y'all to take a look at as a leadership team, but also to send out to your principals and APs. So this is the intention of this resource. So if you go to this page, it'll talk about those components of the PLP that I mentioned. It'll talk through some of those best practice tips. Again, look at some examples, those considerations for the different areas, achievement, growth, school climate. Look at example data sources, example goals, but hear us say that y'all are going to be the ones driving that conversation of what an appropriate PLP is, just like you always have. So this is not intended to supplant any guidance that you provide. It's just to really get the conversation started. To access the portal, you'll see a direct link here. And then if you need step-by-step directions, which again, it's new, right? It's new for all of us. We have those directions available for you. So you'll see for each step that needs to be completed, a video tutorial and some screenshots. So if you've gotten to the point, well, okay, I need to approve those PLPs. What do I do? You just click on that tab. It'll show you a video of what you should be seeing in the portal and then some screenshots. Now, if you want to see a little bit more about what the school administrators are seeing or provide them that guidance for each of those steps, you scroll down and you'll see where it says directions for school administrators, and it'll be the same thing for them. They'll have those videos and some screenshots too. And then if you want access to the user guide, if you keep scrolling down, you'll see a link to that evaluation system user guide there for you. And then when it comes to technical support, you've got contact information there for you as well. So I'm going to bump back. Okay, so we're getting a question here, oh, this is a really good question. Okay, so the question is, I'm going to read it aloud for the group. So if the growth or achievement goals are tied to summative data, which we talked about in this example with ACAP summative or ACT, however, we want to get this done by May, how are we going to be able to sign off? Thank you so much for asking that great question. And so here's something to think about. I almost wouldn't shy away from still setting those goals with your state assessment data, because that's kind of the bread and butter of the report card scores. And so that's when I'd really lean onto what data they have through benchmark assessments and through or maybe common assessments. So what other types of student learning data do they have where they're monitoring their progress? So that's why I mentioned embedding those other types of student learning data into their goals, so that when it comes to closing it out in May, they should have that data available to them, and then they could upload that. Now, once we get those results, probably in July for those state assessment results, no, you're not going to be able to upload that as evidence into the PLP, into this platform. And unfortunately, that's just the nature of the limitation of the timing of these things. But it's the same thing for the ASIP. Right? A lot of times we close out those ASIPs before we have those state assessment results available to us. And so for that, I'd just say, hey, once we do get those results in, I'm still going to engage in that dialogue and conversation between the school administrator and the supervisor to say, did we in fact meet this goal? Now, we're not going to add it as evidence technically here, but we're still going to discuss, did we meet the goal? Did we not? What worked? What didn't? And use that information to set the goal for the next year. So thank you for lifting that up, Kyle. That is a limitation, but I still wouldn't have that discourage you from shying away from setting those goals based off of state assessment results. It's just you may not be able to capture it here in the evaluation system. I'm going to keep monitoring that chat, and I see that Ms. Madison is also responding to emails or your questions as well. So please, if you have questions pop up, you can put that in the chat, and we'll continue to respond to those. All right, so when it comes to that list of high quality professional learning, the law is very specific about what needs to be included on that list. How does it get on the list? Well, it has to meet the law's definition, which is listed here for you. It has to target their school leadership. It has to be comprehensive, sustained, job embedded, all of those things. It has to align with those new leadership standards we talked about, and it has to align with the Alabama standards for professional learning. Now, you're going to see lots of opportunities on that list coming from the State Department. Let's say that you at the district level, you know that you are offering professional learning to your principals and APs that meets the same criteria listed here. Well, there's a request form that you can complete, and I'll show you how to find that. Vendors are also completing a request form to be on that state approved list. Now, it's not approving an entire vendor. It's approving specific professional learning experiences that have been listed on that request form. So just as an FYI for that. And then you may also see some ACLD POUs added to that list as well. Now, where can you find that state approved list? Again, I'm going to go back and refer back to that resource page, alabamaprincipals.org. And here I have it linked directly to the professional learning tab. And so they can scroll down, they can see further guidance, because we do need to award those clock hours and that credit through PowerSchool Professional Learning, because that is our statewide professional learning platform. So all credit has to be awarded here, and they'll be able to pull those transcripts to see how many clock hours that they have. Just so that you know, we are using that naming convention, APLDS, for every course, so that you can easily see that this is on the approved list and counts towards these clock hours. But if you keep scrolling down, you'll see where it's a pretty long list. And so for that reason, we have some built-in filters for you. They can select by professional learning provider or even a regional in-service center. So it will just better filter to meet their needs. If you scroll down, you'll see some conferences. added here. And then you'll also find a link to that professional learning request form. So again, this is something not for principals and APs or to complete. Yeah, it's not for principals and APs to complete. This is intended for superintendents, district administrators, or vendors to complete and request that this be approved. All right. Now, if at the end of the day you're saying, hey, Anna, like just break it down for me. Like, what steps do I need to do and need to do right now and with my deadlines? And so for that, we have another resource available to you. It's a timeline. So this would be a good go-to resource that I would take a look at. So it has a resource for superintendent or a timeline for superintendents. Hey, step by step, I need to do this, then this, and then by these dates. It has a timeline for the APLDS district contacts, and then it has the timeline for school administrators to help keep them on track towards successful program completion. So that's maybe one resource I would take a look at as well, and to share with your people. All right, and I think we had another question in the chat. Just for clarification, the stipend is not tied to achieving goals. The stipend is tied to completing a PLP and participating in 30 clock hours of professional learning. Yes, that is correct. So the way that the law is written is that you get that stipend for successful program completion. And that program is requiring you do that, setting those goals and doing that professional learning or that new principal mentoring program. And as we fully roll everything out, that's also engaging in the full evaluation system and that leadership academy for principals. Now, I do want to say this. There is just one line mentioned in the law that says pending legislative appropriations that potentially there could be an opportunity for additional stipends for if they meet their growth goal. But we're not there yet. That wouldn't roll out for a couple of years. We don't quite know what that looks like. If that is in place and we do get funding for those additional stipends, then we probably are going to have some more parameters and guidance around how to set those growth goals. But we're just not quite there yet. So as of now, the stipend is not pending them meeting their goals, is engaging in this process. Great question. All right, so you also will see a link to a handout that shows you, again, those program requirements and as they increase over time to keep getting that stipend. So that stipend does start this year. And as a reminder, in order to keep getting it, they're going to have to keep successfully completing the program as we roll out all of those components of it. But let's just recap for this year. Right, so principals and APs, exactly what you were saying, Kyle, they need to do that PLP and at least 30 clock hours from the state approved list. And if I'm a newly employed first time principal, PLP, 30 clock hours, new principal mentoring program. Now, this is language from the law in terms of the stipend, right? So we're looking at up to $10,000 for as a baseline for principals and up to an additional stipend of $5,000 if they're at a high poverty school or a low performing school. And then APs are half of that. So APs are up to a baseline of $5,000 and an additional $2,500 if they're at one of these select schools. And the law is specific in how they define high poverty school, low performing school, and that's listed here for you. But they don't have to be both. They don't have to be both high poverty and low performing. They just need to meet one of those criterion to be eligible for that additional stipend. Becky is asking, how can we access this session so we can watch it again with our administrators? Hey, great question. I am recording now, and I'm actually going to I'll send out the link to y'all. It's going to be at that alabamaprincipals.org, that resource page that I've been mentioning. There's a tab with presentations, and so you'll be able to access all the materials and the recordings. So great question. It'll be available there for you. And I will also send out an email through PowerSchool Professional Learning, just as a reminder, hey, here's a link to these things, and this is where you can find that recording. So thank you for asking that, Becky. All right, so again, this is a lot of information. We're trying to take the approach of sharing it a little bit at a time over the fall because this is definitely new, rolling out this fall. And so we've got these superintendent information sessions in August. We'll also have 2 more sessions in September. Those are repeat sessions. And then 2 more sessions in October. also repeat sessions, but you're going to hear different information in September and different information in October. We'll focus in on, hey, what should you be focusing in on right now and any updates. So I encourage you to take a look at and attend those sessions in September and October as well. Really, the purpose for August was to give you that high level overview of, hey, what this new law, this new program is, and kind of those more immediate next. We'll be having information sessions for your APLDS district contacts. So the way that we're trying to communicate this information is first share it with superintendents, then share it with district contacts, and then share it with school administrators. So those APLDS district contacts, they're going to be that critical liaison to help us streamline that communication. We'll be sharing information out with them so that they can communicate it at the district level as well. So we have sessions intended specifically for them. So if you've not selected who your district contact person will be, please communicate that information to me. And I'll provide my email address for you, but we'll be engaging in that conversation with them to keep everybody on track. And then, like I said, we'll have these sessions for school administrators as well. Once we've shared it with superintendents, then district contacts, and then we'll share with school administrators. So please share the session information and encourage them to sign up. Same thing for the superintendent sessions, is that it's going to be different content each month, and we will have repeat sessions within the month. Now, again, this is new, and you may be to a point, well, where do I even start in communicating this out to my principals and APs? So here's just one example of an email communication. You do not have to use this. It's completely optional, but just to make your day a little bit easier, feel free to copy and paste this into an email, share that alabamaprincipals.org website with them, say, hey, this is your district contact. We will keep you updated as we learn more. So that's just available for you. And then if you want to turn this around to them, we have a presentation where it's completely optional as well, where you can make a copy, tailor it, make it your own, just so that you're communicating some of the same information that I've shared with you today. And then if you can, please follow us through social media, encourage your folks to do the same. We'll be pushing out information and updates this way as well. And then for the last thing is that here, if you want to scan that QR code, or we can drop that link into the chat where you can have our contact information, our email and phone number. And listen, this is just a lot of things that are new. And so we are here to help support you. If there's anything that we can do, Miss Madison and I are here for you. So please don't hesitate to reach out. I know that we are at our time at this point. So I am done with the presentation. If you don't have any additional questions, you just feel free to log off, and you have a wonderful rest of your day. I'll be sending out a follow-up email through Power School Professional Learning, kind of recapping some of these things. Like I said, sending a recording to this session. So that is it. That's all I have. But Miss Madison and I will hang back in case anybody has more individualized questions that you want to go over. Feel free to drop those in the chat, or just unmute and we can kind of talk through it.